How's it going, Rogues Gallery? Today we have a video that started as a very simple and short box opening video for Altered TCG that turned into, well, you can see the timeline below, a 2-hour deep dive conversation of the game talking about everything from mechanics to lore to play patterns to design, all with a good friend of mine, Dan from Main Deck. He's really into Altered. I would say Main Deck is probably the premier Altered TCG YouTube channel. They have one of the first podcasts, if not the first podcast, as well as, you know, just a lot of community involvement in the game. And so I invited Dan on to chat about Altered and just to open up a booster box. And like I said, it turned into like a 2-hour thing. So, you know, kick back, relax. It's literally just my hands opening up a booster box with Dan and I chatting. And I hope you enjoy it. I don't know if this video is going to do well at all. And I would appreciate any support on it because, like I said, I have no idea how well this video is going to do. But if you want to know a lot about Altered and get really deep and dive into it, we're gonna do that right now and open up a box of the retail version, which is also a lot of fun. We open up some really good cards in here, but you know, over the course of the next couple hours. So sit back, relax, and let's dive in to Altered TCGs, one of the most interesting games on the market. Let's do it.
All right, well, the way I see it, this is just gonna be a really casual video. We're just gonna be opening up this box of Altered. I don't know what edition you'd want to call this. I guess my first question of many that I'm gonna be asking you, Dan, is that, well, we have the Kickstarter edition. Does this have an official name? Is this just called like retail edition, or?
Yeah, retail is what we call it. KS is literally on the box for the Kickstarter edition, so it says Altered KS edition or Kickstarter edition. This is just Beyond the Gates. Set's called Beyond the Gates, and it's called the retail version.
The retail version. All right, and you know, it looks very similar to the Kickstarter box, with one major exception. There are 36 booster packs in here instead of 37, and that is because of the Kickstarter stretch goal. Everyone got an extra little pack.
Extra booster.
Yeah.
All right, really nice boosters in the Kickstarter, though. So,
hey, I was actually very impressed with the card quality in the Kickstarter, and I realized opening my Kickstarter starter decks and then opening the I guess the retail starter decks that Equinox sent me, the card quality was a little bit different. Like they were printed from different Cardamundi facilities. I can't really quantify that, but it did feel just a slightly different. I deal with so much card games and cards and stuff. I could feel like the subtle difference. They feel a little bit more coarse, I would say.
There were two different printers that were brought on for this. I'm blanking on the name of the other one, but it was like Cardamundi was one, and then there was another printer. And that was because of how big the Kickstarter got. In order to fulfill everything and get the retail ready, they had to find another option for printing them. So
really,
that makes sense. Yeah.
So not just like two Cardamundi facilities, but like actually two different print companies.
As far as I understand, I don't always know the inner workings of that end of the industry. So I don't know if one's like just an offshoot of the other or something, but they did have two different names. I'll try and find it for you. I can get that info for you. Okay,
interesting. I do like to think about that kind of stuff every now and then. I think it's part of the industry that a lot of folks just don't talk about or even think about, and I find it pretty interesting. So while Dan might be doing that, let's just go ahead and check out the box. So as all y'all can see, this is just a very pretty box actually, with some of the key art, different than the Kickstarter version if you've seen my previous video, and the packs themselves are also different as we can see here. Very pretty. You know what? Maybe the printer even says, the printer on here. Published by Equinox. They're from France.
I found it. It's Ludofact is another manufacturer that they're using, which is based in Germany.
Interesting. Okay. All right.
So these are retail. It says here, this is from an update on the Kickstarter. It says the retail products were printed for Europe by Cardamundi and for the rest of the world by Ludofact. And then I believe the Kickstarter must be, I think, entirely through Cardamundi then.
Okay. All right, so let's see what these feel like then. This is our very first pack of the retail Beyond the Gates 12-card booster pack.
Good luck, Cal.
Cheers. I've had pretty good luck with Altered so far. I did open up a gold pack, not to spoil my Kickstarter opening a little bit, but I have opened up a gold pack and I have opened up a promo. Actually, the card quality feels really, really nice in these. Yeah, these feel a little bit better than the booster or than the starter decks, I would say.
Oh,
so
great.
let's see. We have for those of you who don't know, this is a hero. There are 3 heroes for every faction. There are 6 factions in the entire game. And it looks like we do not get the foil versions that were in the Kickstarter version, just the non-foil versions here.
Yep.
So heroes will just go into their own little pile. And then we have some commons. And what I find really interesting about commons, just rarities in general in this game, are that they're basically the same kind of cards, just across different rarities. So you have red as a common, but you can also have red as a rare, and red as a unique, and red as like a faction shifted card. And they're all red, and you can only have 3 reds in your deck, but you can have, like 2 commons and a rare or something like that. Which I think is very interesting. You can kind of budget your deck, that way. And by budget, I mean you can't just run all rares. You can only have 15 rares total in your deck.
That makes deck building such an interesting puzzle every time. Every time I built a deck so far, I've sat out with the set of rares I wanted, and then I did the commons, and then I went back and changed almost every rare that I wanted, because you have to sometimes choose commons over rares.
Yeah, that makes sense. I really like deck building restrictions like that. A lot of other games that I play have these really interesting deck building restrictions that make it fun to build decks. So like for WeCross, for example, you have a 40 card deck, but only half your deck can be life burst cards, and you really need to pay attention to what cards are life burst cards, what cards are not life burst cards, and sometimes you have to choose to not run some cards because you just need to have that critical number. So I really like restrictions like that. So here we have our first little pack of bunch of rares at the end. It's not a game where you just get 1 rare. You typically, at least for the Kickstarter version, you get like a couple. So this one is a faction shifted card. This is Ouroboros, Lyra Bastion. We'll go much quicker as we go. Just wanted to, in case this is your first Altered video. This is a Tanuki. This is just a rare version of good old Tanuki. I like this dude. He sabotages, which is pretty nice. And then we have an Ortis Gatekeeper, rare. And then we have a common foiler. And I will also say, by the time this video is posted, all of the QR codes will have been scanned already, so don't bother trying to scan them.
I like that Ortis Gatekeeper a lot. It's one of those rares that's like hard to sometimes find. Again, as you said, you can only have 15 rares in your deck, which is like 5 3-ups. So if you have to choose 5 different cards to upgrade, it's hard to fit some of these that are just like straight value upgrades. Compared to the common Gatekeeper, the rare one puts a token on both sides of the expedition, not just one.
Seems
which
good.
is it can be really powerful, especially with cards that are like boosting up your tokens when you play them or everything. But to play that, then you have to give up playing some really strong other rares, out of faction cards. But I still love it.
Yeah. So what are the differences? Ooh, Aether Shard. What are the differences between the Kickstarter version and the tokens actually feel nicer in this too, and the retail version here? Other than the pack size or the number of packs and the foil hero.
Right. So yeah, you do get that 37th pack. You do get all your heroes in foil, but then there are some key differences. There's a reason why those Kickstarter booster boxes, if you can still find them on the secondary market, are going to be usually about twice the price of the retail ones. The packs in the retail edition come with 3 rares, as we've seen so far. The Kickstarter edition, they come with anywhere between 3 and 5 rares, or one can be replaced by unique, of course. So they have chances of hitting higher numbers of rares.
Okay.
They have a higher unique drop rate, which I'm sure, Kel, you'll be getting soon for everyone to see what a unique might look like. So the the retail boxes, I believe, are going to be looking at somewhere between 3 to 5 uniques per box, something like that, probably averaging about 4.5. I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but it's going to be probably somewhere around there. And The Kickstarter one is Kickstarter boxes are typically going to have something like 5 to 7 uniques per box. Uniques are really the thing that we're, once you're really deep in Altered, the thing you're chasing, because those things are they're just the exciting hits. Ooh, and there's a unique foiler. Nice.
I have so many of these now.
Yeah.
I got really lucky with my boxes and opened up a bunch, and then I opened up another one of these in one of the starter decks as well. So I actually have, I don't know, 20 something probably.
It's great. You can foil out your whole unique collection and then print them all you want.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. And that's kind of like what these are, by the way. The foilers are literally a way to make cards foil digitally. And what I mean by that is, say like I have this brass bug hub, and I was like, okay, I want to make this foil. Then I use one of my, I believe rare counts for the faction shifted ones, right?
Yes.
Use a rare foiler to make this foil on your account, and then when you print it from Equinox, they will ship you the foil version, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, and you can print foil or non-foil, so you're not even locked in. If you end up deciding you want some non-foils for some reason in the future, you still can get those, which is kind of just a nice quality of life feature.
Yeah.
The last thing about the Kickstarter booster boxes to be aware of is that there are a chunk of cards that have exclusive alternate art in the Kickstarter. So there's what are some of them? Foundry Mechanic, Loki, Sneezer Shroom, Kodama. Yeah, there's a bunch of cards like that have an alternate art. And when you get a unique of an alternate art card in the Kickstarter edition, it always comes foil, pre-printed foil, which is really nice. Makes those feel really special to hit as well.
Yeah.
And then finally, speaking of what feels special to hit, the Kickstarter edition has the rare chance of getting promos, which are going to be like full art character cards from the roadshow events, things that people wouldn't be able to get anymore otherwise. And a rare chance of getting a golden booster, which is basically a god pack that comes with 4 unique foilers and 10 uniques, including 1 guaranteed alt art foil. Ooh, there we go.
All right.
Speaking of uniques,
We got a Mr. Frankenstein here. All right, so this one, well, I'll just read it out. So this is a Lyra Frankenstein, Dr. Frankenstein. 3 hand cost, 3 reserve cost, 2/3/3. If you play him from hand, you can pay 1 additional. If you do, you may activate the arrow triggers of target permanent you control. And then also when you play from hand, you may put a card from your hand in reserve. If you do, roll a die on a 4+ draw card on a 1 to 3 resupply. Okay, this guy feels like value. He feels like not super crazy, but to me, he feels like a lot of value, right? You get a essentially draw a card when you play from hand, either draw a card or resupply, which puts a card from your deck into your reserve. And you can also pay an additional 1 to trigger the little arrow effects of one of your dudes.
this is okay. So this is an interesting. I like this unique actually. I like this a lot. It needs a pretty particular deck, but one thing that it does that's really cool in particular is that there's a hero in Lyra called Nevenka and Blotch, and Nevenka is the dice rolling hero. So Lyra has 3 heroes. One cares about dice rolling, the other 2 don't. And Nevenka, you're going to roll dice. It's going to be a little random. Her ability allows you to, when you roll the die once per phase, basically, you either are going to anchor something down so it stays until the next turn, which is really strong. Give it a boost on a 2 through 5, which is, usually actually you do it when it's very helpful and it helps you win a side, but it's not like crazy. It's just good. And on a 1, you actually just have to remove the card from play, send it to reserve. I have hit that 1 when I needed to hit anything but too many times. It's very sad, but also I've completely made my opponents cry because I would anchor things down, my best thing down for multiple turns, and they just can't deal with that. So you win some, you lose some, right? That's dice rolling.
Yeah.
But in this deck, you're often going to play some cards there's a card called Katagarin Mage Dancer, who has a Lyra version, which is whenever you roll dice, you get to put a boost counter on them. And that Lyra, you probably don't have it because it's not a faction rare, so it'd be pretty surprising if you got it. But that card is a card you build that entire deck around sometimes. And what that Frankenstein you have right there can do is he can play him. You pay that extra 1 to allow you to use the when played ability of something like a cheap or a Ouroboros Trickster, who just has a when played roll a die to get some boost counters on it, and then will also be able to use the second ability to roll a die at another time and get another die roll. So he's like, he can allow you to roll a lot of dice more consistently while getting some other incremental value potentially as well. He's actually a pretty solid unique, and the cool thing about these uniques, like I like uniques like this that aren't the cards you already want to put in a deck. Like a unique Ouroboros Trickster is kind of sad because you already wanted to play Ouroboros Trickster.
Oh, gotcha.
But a unique Frankenstein might not have had effects that you care about for your deck normally. So he's going to allow, basically means he can act as like a 4th copy of particular effects in the deck rather than being one of the 3 copies of an effect you already wanted to have, if that made any sense.
Yeah.
So I love when my uniques are like these, ooh, I wasn't going to play this card, so now it can just sit in my deck and I get like 4 versions of this effect instead of just 3. And I think it's cool.
Yeah, and for those who don't know what uniques are, if you haven't watched any of like the other 3 altered videos, uniques are literally unique, right? This is the only version of this card that exists exactly how it is. They're procedurally generated within parameters is what I've come to understand how it is. It's procedurally generated within certain parameters. They vary wildly. Some of them are like really strong. Some of them are not so strong as you would guess, but they're always the most exciting part of opening Altered, seeing what cool uniques you get. I really wasn't super interested in Lyra, but I also opened up a really sweet unique Lyra card in my Kickstarter opening that lets you add 1 to any dice roll, which seems really good. Yeah.
You have a really cool Navenka and Blotch deck coming together right now.
Yeah.
Uniques are what to me make Altered. I said this and I'm standing by it so far. And don't get me wrong, I love so many card games. I love all the card games we support right now on my channel, but Altered was the most fun I've had opening packs in like a long time, because you just had no idea what your uniques were going to be, and it was so exciting every time you saw one. It wasn't like, oh cool, I got my 3rd copy of that legendary for my set. Like I'm happy about that, but it's not as exciting.
Agreed. It gives me the same feeling that I got when I used to play and open Keyforge, right? Because it's like this feeling of like, hey, what I'm opening is like mine and no one else has this particular thing, which is just this really cool experience. It's also the same kind of feeling I had when I opened up Magic when I was a kid, where you didn't know what the cards were. Like this is a long time. This is like 1995, right? Like some people maybe knew what the cards were, but it wasn't like very well documented. Maybe there was a Scry magazine that had the price list or something, but like, this is before those encyclopedias came out, and you'd open up a pack of like, I don't know, Ice Age or something, and you'd be like, oh, what the hell is this? Which is just like this cool experience.
Jimmy's got a Chaos Lord.
Yeah. And so I stopped here because we do have another unique.
Awesome.
This one is a Jeanne d'Arc.
Ooh, okay, this could be good.
So she looks really cool. I have not pulled a unique one of her yet. So she has a 4-hand, 3 reserve, 4/3/3. For those out there, I guess I'll say this first, and then I'll ask you some questions about nomenclature. She says, when I leave the expedition zone, create an Ortis Recruit 1/1/1 soldier token in target expedition, and then she has the ability to kind of, I don't know what this is called, yeeter from the reserve to give something fleeting.
Yeah, okay.
So she seems like fine. Like whenever she leaves the expedition zone, she gets to create a 1/1/1 soldier token. I do like that mechanic in particular, because that means that even if your opponent removes it by some means, then you still get the token, which is pretty cool. Yeah, interesting. I think if I'm remembering right, the rare version creates like 2 tokens in a specific zone.
Yeah. So this is a great unique to show people to show the variety of what kind of uniques you can open. Some of them are just like, wow, like Mondo upgrades to the rare, like really, you know, just really strong. Some of them are really weird, and they're like, that's a weird set of abilities. I don't know how to use this. This one is an interesting category where it's better than the rare in some ways and worse in some others. And it's really like a card where if you want a Jeanne d'Arc in your deck, you're actually going to sit there. You're going to think like, should I spend one of my unique slots on this? Because I'd say overall it's slightly better than the rare. I don't know, in certain aspects. So Jeanne d'Arc's interesting because her common is a 4-hand 4 reserve 2/2/2 with the ability to make a recruit in each expedition. Okay.
Yeah.
And you said, I'm looking at this one. You said this one is just one expedition?
Yeah, it's just says target expeditions.
Yeah. Okay. So the common one has much lower stats and a higher cost to play from reserve, but makes a recruit in both expeditions. The rare one is a 5-hand 5 reserve 2/2/2, still a 2/2/2, that makes 2 recruits in each expedition.
Yeah.
When she leaves the expedition zone. So of course, Jeanne d'Arc or Joan of Arc is inspiring the populace when she dies, since creating all the soldiers afterwards, which is kind of just a cool thematic thing. But this card itself, oh yeah, you have the comment up right now. I brought back the camera. The problem with Jeanne d'Arc is that the turn you play her, you usually aren't making much progress, or she's almost doing nothing. As a 2/2/2 body is one that the opponent is usually super able to just, you know, push aside, have stronger numbers than it, unless you can like really sandbag her to the end of a turn sequence and like sneak in somewhere. But she costs a little too much to do that with. So this one is kind of cool because this Jeanne d'Arc is more competitive. The turn you play her, like she'll come down there and she'll be like, yeah, no, I'm going to take this side, especially if it's forest.
Yeah.
But she's making less on the back end, but then she costs even less to play from reserve, or you have the ability to use it's called a support ability, to discard her to give something fleeting. If that's, you know, sometimes that's like, I can't let you have that Shenlong back or something. So that can be really clutch, but, that's an interesting one. I kind of like it though, because I only play Jeanne of Arc in very, very specific decks now, and I only play the rare one because 4 for a 2/2/2 it just feels so bad every time.
Yeah, I was looking to see if I pulled one of the heroes yet. I got this dude. He's an okay comparison, but not the one I wanted to make. But he's a hero that just spits out a 1/1/1 every single turn for free, or rather at noon for free.
Yeah.
I was gonna try to find one of the ones that spits out a 2/2/2, but what I was trying to get at is there are hero abilities that just kind of like give you that body for essentially free, or just for doing what they want you to do. So 4 for 2/2/2 doesn't seem super great.
Right.
I guess this is a good time to ask, what are good stat lines? What are considered to be good stat lines for Altered, right? And so like, what I mean by that is I'm going to use Magic the Gathering as another reference, because I know you and I both have played Magic, so we have history, and I know a lot of people have as well. So in Magic, obviously, what used to be a good rate was a bear, like a 2-drop that had 2 power and 2 toughness. That's not the case anymore. It's usually like a 3/3 for 2 now, plus upside. But
yep.
Or like I remember back in the day, Juzam Jin was a 5/5 for 4 that also hurt you, and he was like considered to be very powerful. And now you have, 6/6s for 4 or 5/5s for 4 with crazy upside that also have flying and also do a bunch of other stuff. So what I'm getting at are, what are the good stat lines for Altered? When you look at something and you're like, oh, that looks sweet. Like that's what a overcosted or overstated unit would look like.
In Altered, I'm just thinking through sort of the entire card pool, and my really quick heuristic for this would be for about every, this is going to be weird, you're going to have to do math in your head, sorry. For every 1.5 mana cost, you should expect 2 in each stat, more or less. So like a 2/2/2, for 1.5 isn't real, but for 3, a 4/4/4 vanilla is like, that's Cernunnos, for example, for Muna, and that's usually a rare. So that's like a rare quality creature. Commons are probably going to be closer to about even, like 1.5 or 1 for 1 stat wise.
Okay.
But if you have a rare in your deck that has no stats, if you spend 3, you expect to get a 4/4. If you spend 6, you expect to get is this even making sense? A 9/9/9 is Shenlong for 6, or for for 6. I think that's right. It's yeah, it's something like that. So basically slightly above the cost that you expect to pay. But there's tons of things that are going to play into that and screw with that. And the fact that Altered has 3 stats means that a lot of things can totally mess with that heuristic as well.
Gotcha.
A 0 in one of your 3 stats, for example, can mean that you don't win the side at all, or it can mean that absolutely nothing, because it isn't relevant for that comparison, depending on the point of the game that your hero and companion, your opponent's hero and companion are at. So it is tough, I think, to give a really good heuristic. But yeah, I mean, look for around the same cost, slightly above for rares.
Well, I've looked through here while you were talking, and I found 2 examples that might help illustrate. So Tomoe Gozen is a 3 cost, and she's a 2/5/5, which seems really powerful. And why that seems powerful to me is because they put a downside on the card. And her downside is she can't be played if you have less than 7 mana orbs. And so that tells me, at least from a design standpoint, that the designers think this is an overstated card, where they're like, okay, the stats are so high that we need to give it a downside. So 2/5/5 for 3 is what the designers would consider, or at least for a common card, to be overstated. And then there's this dude, which I think the one you mentioned, Sir Nunos. This is just a common version, but he is 4 costs and he's 4/4/4, and then 3 costs from reserve 4/4/4. He doesn't do anything else. That's all he does. So he's just a big dude. Yeah. That
rare Sir Nunos is where they bring the hand cost down to 3, and so he becomes this turn 1 play where you are almost guaranteed to win that side when you put him down turn 1.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, cool. Well, let's continue on with more packs. We hit 2 of the uniques. We'll go a little bit quicker here. I don't want the single box to take too long. Though I did open up 2 boxes and it was like an hour long video. But hey, people seem to enjoy it. That video did quite well. So I like to take my time and like to talk through this kind of stuff. Things that I find interesting. Hey, look, it's my boy Flamel, the one that I spoiled.
Yeah, your spoiler. Cool. I'd like to think that the people are going to enjoy a little bit of our discussion as well. Hopefully I can provide something useful for you.
I am. Oh yeah, you are for sure. I am noticing a lot of the alternate arts, like this Athena. Like, I actually really enjoyed her other art in the Kickstarter version. I'm not saying I'm not enjoying this one too, but I really enjoyed her art in the Kickstarter version.
I think the Kickstarter, pretty much across the board, the Kickstarter alt arts they knocked out of the park, and I think that's of all the uniques I opened 1 foil Athena,
nice.
because it's alt art, so it came foil. Out of all the foil uniques I got, I think that's my favorite one. It really does look, it captures the godly Athena vibe, I think, really well.
Yeah, and like Loki, another example is I opened up a foil Loki. The other one,
good.
And he's got like a little burger next to him.
He's in a card shop in that art. He's holding altered cards.
Yeah. I'm like, so cool. That's so meta. Like, it's so like, like 4th wall breaking. It's interesting. Ooh, Axiom Hero. So here's Shenlong, just a big dude. 6 cost, 888. Really, just a big old dragon. I don't remember opening too many of him in my 2 Kickstarter boxes.
I have definitely,
or rather, 4 Kickstarter boxes.
I've definitely been frustrated by Bravos players when I have this well-laid plan, and then they go, "Oh, what turn is it? Okay, here I'll just they put the rare down. It's a 999 for 6. Like, cool. all of my strategy out the window because your thing just has big numbers on it."
Yeah. You gotta have removal, I guess. Right?
Yep. The problem is when players find a way to sort of pad their turn so that you end up having to either play something or pass for the turn, and then you can't respond to whatever they do after you. Right?
Yeah. Let's see. Foundry Engineer. I opened up a really cracked, unique Foundry Engineer, I think. I don't remember exactly what she does, but I can look it up on my app. But the unique one that I opened, I think, is like super cracked. Hey, a rare foiler. I'll look it up later. What she does is she's faction shifted to Ortis, then she spits out a whole bunch of little tokens, Like she just
Yeah.
barfs them out. And I just read it and I'm like, okay, this is a unique that just I can tell is really
Yeah.
strong.
Some of
Like-
them you read them and you're just like, yep, those are all the words I like on a card, multiple times even.
It's like I barely even played this game and I can just tell that this card it was really good. It's like oh no, what she did, she has this effect too, where you play her and the next permanent you play. So I think she's like a 3 cost, and you play her and the next permanent you play costs 2 less, and then also she spits out a bunch of stuff as well. So she like basically spits out a bunch of stuff for free, and then yeah, that's what she does, and provides her own stats. So
Yeah.
seem pretty good.
Really great for like Sierra and Oddball decks.
I have in some of my openings I've been commenting on how the Kellon cylinder
Oh, that's you.
the Kellon like power source is what I assume it is. Like that's what some sort of energy. And I'm like,
Yes.
oh, it's me.
Yeah, there's a ton of lore. For people who don't know, there's like a crazy amount of lore already built for this game. The Equinox has filled their website with a million articles going into the different heroes, the different factions, different parts of the world, the regions, and you get all these stories that you can dig into. And they're honestly like really well done stories too. I've been quite impressed with them, and we went and did we did a series of podcast episodes. There are least viewed podcast episodes of anything,
Yeah.
which you know.
That's
I
how
get-
it is. That's how it is, you know.
I get, but I'm happy we did them there because they are a nice resource for anyone who like doesn't want to sit down and read articles, just wants to listen to something while they're doing whatever, and still is like kind of curious about the lore of Altered. I think you'll find if you're at all interested, I think you'll find them pretty fascinating because they're really well written stories.
Yeah, I haven't dove into that quite yet, but I will say, just kind of from a cursory glance, I think it's really interesting how they're incorporating their own IP characters and world and mixing it with stuff like literally we have Dr. Frankenstein and Jeanne d'Arc. One of them is a real historical person. The other one is a fictional character made up by Mary Shelley.
Yep.
And we also have this is Baba's Ispa, which is the house from Baba Yaga's house, right? It's got the little chicken feet on it. But then then you also have your Ortis, and basically all the heroes are just kind of their own original thing, which I actually really appreciate. I'm glad that they didn't use Jeanne d'Arc or Frankenstein as one of the heroes. I like that they put their own lore first to represent the characters that you're playing.
Absolutely. The characters that you see that you're familiar with, those are called Eidolons. And basically the Alterers who have sort of found the ability to channel the magic of the world that kind of happened when the Cataclysm is the event that collided the realm of imagination and dreams. If you're if you watch Sandman or Red Sandman, you can think of that sort of realm of dreams colliding with the real world. And the Alterers are able to basically channel these Eidolons from not just the memories of people, but also the imagination of the world of the world prior to the current world, and bring these characters to life, whether they were real or not. So it was a kind of a cute way of working in a lot of not IP locked characters, but ones that people know, right? A lot of common knowledge, myth, historical figures into their own lore.
Yeah, I like that. It makes it more recognizable, so people have that instant recognition on stuff, but also being able to do their own unique thing. So I have another gameplay related question.
Yeah.
Obviously, this card's effect is very strong. This is the rare version of the Izmir Bastion, Katagir, but it has an 8 cost for both hand and reserve. My question is, how attainable is that 8 cost in Altered? Or is this if you look at something in Magic and you're just yeah, I'm never playing that. Outside of a dedicated hyper ramp or a deck where you cheat it out, that's never getting played.
This is more attainable than you think.
Okay.
So Izmir is the faction of control. Like Izmir is, if you're a control player and you're looking at this game, which faction should I play? It's probably Izmir. And what Izmir is able to do, I have seen this happen plenty of times in starter decks, especially. Izmir is able to just stop anyone from advancing turn after turn over and over again. It's fog, right? They're basically fogging the game multiple turns to the point where you're going to get to turn, what is it going to be, 6 with that? Turn 6 is what the earliest you could play that if you're not ramping. You're going to play all these control spells, just kind of stop your opponent from ever making any ground on you. Then turn 6, even if they get 1 or 2, it's not a big deal. Turn 6, you drop that Bastion. You're going to lose both sides that turn, right? Because you're spending your whole turn to play this thing. It doesn't affect the board at all. The opponent just goes, okay, put one here, pass. And then they advance both sides. But now every single turn, you get to free cast a potentially gigantic spell, right? Or something. And then have all your other resources still to continue to play. It's more playable than you would think. There, yeah, you got a great combination of cards, so go for it.
Yeah. So like you're talking, and I'm just like, okay, I've been reading some cards as I've been opening. I don't just kind of like throw them into a big old pile. I mean, I kind of do, but I also read them as well.
We all do.
So some of the cards that I've noticed going through Izmir. So you have Kraken's Wrath, right? This big old spell costs 5. Has fleeting. In fact, most of the spells that I've seen that are powerful have fleeting. And this says select or send to reserve up to 3 target characters with total hand cost 5 or less. Now, my question here comes with the Izmir Bastion. Can I activate this the turn I play it? So say I spend my whole turn, I drop this for 8. Can I immediately just be like, okay, now I can play my Kraken's Wrath for free?
Oh yeah, you definitely can.
Okay.
If you're set up for it. Yeah, I mean, so you're right. I spoke a little too soon because you don't necessarily lose that turn. If you've got the Kraken's Wrath, or like even better, the rare version of Kraken's Wrath, which is total mana cost 6 or less. So it's like that much better, right? You can totally drop that and go, and then I'm going to Kraken's Wrath that side of the board or something. The reason why, though, you still might lose both sides that turn, it's still, I think, reasonably likely, is because you are always having to think about the timing, the tempo of everything you do here. If you play Katagir, then pass the turn, then your opponent has a turn. They're going to put something somewhere. If they just play like a 1-drop or a 2-drop somewhere, your next action is going to be you can use Katagir, but then you're out of mana, right? So you're going to have to, you can play whatever off of it for free, which might bounce their 2-drop or their 1-drop if that's what they did. And then you have to pass. And now you're passed out for the rest of the turn. So you can't do the cheeky thing where you can be like, okay, I'm just going to wait until you've played everything and now free play this Kraken's Wrath. Because as soon as you pass in Altered, you are passed for the entire phase. So it's a little trickier. But
I think that's where the starter deck hero comes into play a little bit, right?
It is.
You can kind of do your little, like, I can't remember what it's exactly called, but your like little fake pass, right?
After you, yeah. It's an ability that's kind of in the color pie, if we will, of Izmir, which is just soft pass. Says, I'm not doing anything, you go next. But you can still react to things later. So that's, yeah, if you can get your opponent, though, if you get your opponent to really commit out, then you can actually drop Katagir and not lose any ground that turn. And I mean, you're going to be in a good spot at that point. That game is pretty in your hands.
Yeah. And even if you do lose out, there's a couple things you can do. And I can already kind of see how this is going to play out a little bit, where you would play this, right? They would take their action, and then you could just pass your action, and then they have to commit something else or pass. And then you can, remove whatever they play, and then it'll force them to play more cards, thus, stripping their hand of resources. And even if you lose that round, you're still like, enacting your strategy, which is, stripping their hand of resources, which yeah. Or you can do stuff like this guy, which I immediately read him and I was like, okay, he seems real good. Even the common one seems real good.
He's good.
This is Sakurabru. He's got a 7 cost, which is quite high, but his effect is very strong. He also has a 4 cost as well. But the 4 cost for the common version doesn't matter. I'm not even sure if it matters for the rare version either, but his stats are just 4/4/4. But if you play him from your hand, your opponent's expedition facing mine moves backwards 1 region. So he basically forces your opponent back an entire region, which seems really, really strong in a game where the whole point is to move forward regions. And I have not seen any other card like this, unless there's something else. This is the only card that I've seen that can actually force things back a region, which seems really good.
I think that is currently the only push your opponent back card, but there are a few cards that are just going to stop expeditions from moving for the turn as well.
Oh yeah.
So you can halt time as well with some other options in Izmir. If you like the sound of all that stuff, Izmir's the faction for you.
Oh yeah, Izmir is definitely one of the ones that I'll be playing. But that's not saying a lot though, because I do plan on playing almost all of these to some degree. I'll definitely be playing all of them. At least for the starter versions and trying them all out, but
they're all so fun.
I'll probably be building decks for all of them. Oh, what'd you say?
Isitak is the one of the characters that stops expeditions from moving as well. That's
yeah, it just locks both of them in place. It says your other expedition and the expedition facing it can't move forward.
Yeah, so it's saying your side
good.
and your opponent's side on. So if you play him in hero, neither player's companion can move that turn. If you play him in companion, neither player's hero can move that turn. So they can still force him to move on his side, but of course you just played a big thing, so it might be harder to do.
Yeah, I mean he seems real good, or it seems real good, and especially where you're playing a whole bunch, your opponent's playing a whole bunch in the other lane. You just don't play anything in that lane, and you're just like, all right, there you go.
Yep.
You just wasted all your stuff.
Yep. He's out of faction in Izmir too, if you really want to have those big control endgame characters.
Yeah. I haven't pulled the Izmir one that lets you do the pass, but she's the starter deck. She's the starter deck one. Home away goes in. Yeah, there's a few strategies and decks that I'd like to try. Ooh, okay, here we go.
Oh, right. Is that a Baku? Let's go.
So okay, this is one of the things I was going to talk about. I like Baku. I think he's really sick. Let's see if we got a really sick, unique Baku.
They often are really good. I'm excited.
All right, so Baku, this one is a 4-hand, 3 reserve, 2/1/3. When I go to reserve from Expedition Zone, if I have 2 or more boosts, interesting, target opponent discards a card from their hand. Then he has a second line of text. When you play a spell, you may discard a card from your reserve. If you do, I gain 2 boosts.
Yes. All right. I was hoping. Okay. He works. So sometimes you get uniques with these effects, and they don't quite mesh with each other. If that second ability didn't give him boosts, I would be like, this is kind of a pretty mid Baku.
Yeah.
But the fact that he can fuel himself, this is the advantage this unique Baku has over the regular one. Is the regular one is just when played from hand, you get to force your opponent to discard. So plus side, they discard right away.
It's pretty good.
Downside, it's just 1 card, right? But this Baku he makes himself actually compete in whatever lane you play him in. And both times you play him, he is going to be able to get the opponent to discard a card. So he is worth quite a few cards on his own. You know, I like to tell people, we talked about this during my stream too, you think about the cards in Altered because of the reserve mechanic, because you play a card from hand, it goes into play, then it goes to reserve, and then you get to play it a second time from reserve. You have to think of every card in hand as kind of worth 2 cards, or each play of a card is like half of a play or something. So when you draw a card, it's you're drawing kind of 2 cards worth. When you discard a card, you're sort of discarding 2 cards worth. When you sabotage a card, you're discarding half a card, right? So Baku being able to discard 2 cards and still count himself as reasonable stats in a lane twice is that's a valuable card. That's a really good Baku. I like that one.
Yeah, he'll be a 4/3/5 if you do the thing. So this is pretty good. And, you know, obviously you're playing Izmir, you'll want to be playing spells anyway to trigger that effect. You can even trigger it more than once if you want to. It just says whenever you play a spell, you can discard a card from reserve and then he gets 2 boosts.
Yeah.
He seems pretty sweet. I was actually hoping for a good Baku. I think the other Baku that I opened was also pretty okay, but not immediately like super good.
this Baku, actually, you open Afanas and Senka in that pack, your hero there as well, who's
Oh yeah,
who's the
yeah.
spell singing hero. Whenever you play a spell, you get to put a boost counter on something.
Oh yeah.
So
That seems good.
I don't know
Yeah.
if you can see any synergies there, Kel, but
Yeah, it seems pretty good. Seems pretty good. All right. Yeah, I am eager to kind of build decks. This is a game that doesn't really play too much like any other TCG. Well, definitely not any TCG that I currently play. And I can only think of a couple that even operate in similar spaces. So building decks for this is going to be very fun and interesting. Grand Endeavor. Yeah, this card seems also very good. This is another one that I mentioned, or that I saw. I'm just like, okay, yeah. It just says, at noon, target expedition moves forward 1 region. So you just get a free move forward. It costs 6, but as Dan mentioned earlier, in this game, you get 3 resources at the start. So this is what you can play this on turn 3 if you just kind of, jam it out, right?
turn 4.
Turn 4
Yep.
because you get to play an additional one on the first
3,
or
4, 5, 6. So
Yeah.
3 on turn 1.
Oh, right,
4 on
right,
turn
right.
2. Yeah.
Yeah.
It took me a while to get used to doing that. Even earlier, I had to think about it. So
Because you don't get to play an extra one on turn 1. You just get the
Correct.
3, right? Okay, yeah.
Correct. Yep.
Um,
And this card's a good place to point out that there is multiplayer, both free for all and teams variants of Altered as well.
ooh.
That says target expedition, so it's saucy actually.
Also, this is the one that I think is in particular is really sweet because I think this is this normally Ordis?
Yes.
This one's faction shifted into Izmir, so this kind of card seems real strong in a control deck where you're controlling the board and not particularly, putting a lot of stats. You slam down something like this to guarantee that you move forward seems really good. If you're controlling the board, wiping things, controlling your opponent's hand with like this Baku or whatever, then you can just force your stuff forward. Yeah, seems really good.
So far, that Baku is the all-star, I think, of the uniques you've pulled. Really a big fan of that one.
Yeah, but Baku seems real good. In general, Baku seems really good. Just anything that with enters, forces your opponent to discard, I think is really good, and almost like any game that I play. There's another one too that I think it feels really strong. I don't have the experience to know how good she actually is, but is it Alice? The one that you play and she just yeets a dude? That also seems real good.
Dorothy
I imagine
Gale.
you can... Dorothy, yes.
Yep.
I imagine there are unique versions of her that are very, very strong.
Yeah, I've seen some. They do the thing where you'll get the uniques where they'll already have the built-in removal ability, and it'll have a second ability, and it's also removal. So I've seen like the double removal Dorothy's like, yep, that's gonna do some work.
Yep. Generally speaking, I think you maybe have answered this a little bit earlier. So here's a rare Alice, and basically what she does is she has big stats for the rare version, and she has the After You effect. How often do you actually use a rare slot on something that just has like big stats or something like that? Is it like deck dependent?
Yeah, that's going to be pretty deck dependent. I think there's sort of an essence. Because this is a French game, we'll say there's a je ne sais quoi to every card.
Oui.
That is really fundamental to what it does and why you choose to put it in your deck. So Alice is a great example of this, where you're never actually putting Alice in the deck because of the stats. You're putting Alice in the deck because she has a support ability that After Use, which allows you to like have these turns like we were talking about earlier, where you can extend the turn really late to force your opponent to play all of their stuff out, and then you know exactly what to do to react to everything. There you have your Joan of Arcs, who are also like a great example. You're playing Joan of Arc typically because you're trying to make a bunch of tokens, right? And you're okay giving up a turn to do that.
Yeah,
but
go ahead.
I think I'd say those are the rares that I play least often so far. The ones where they just have the stat upgrades. But that said, I also feel like in this case of Joan of Arc, I don't like playing the low stat one. I look at your high stat one and go like, I might actually put that in because it's not as explosive, but it also doesn't lose me a side turn I played. And that actually, at some point, you do have to think about the numbers because that's how you win the game.
Yeah, I also think this is a nice just little illustration of the illustrations and how they change based on the rarity. So you have like the common version, she's just kind of like standing there. The rare version's very similar, but she has like this halo. And then the unique version is that, but even more. She's got like her sword raised up and a little bit more of a dynamic pose, which I think is cool. I like how the art like subtly changes between the rarities. It's pretty cool.
I'm a huge fan of this, and Kel, I'm gonna send this into your wheelhouse a little bit, but Flesh and Blood kicked off by doing this thing that was kind of a fresh idea in the industry that I'm sure kept their costs down right away too. But they printed the same card art 3 times on 3 different cards.
Yeah, they did. Yep.
Which I honestly, kudos. I think that was such an innovative way because they didn't try and kickstart anything. This is kind of before that became a really popular thing to do. And they were able to get their game off the ground and kept their costs down. And that was like such a smart idea. But I do think it's so cool to be able to see this like intentionality to this, where they have the escalating art and the art kind of tells a story on its own, even though it's the same card printed 3 times.
Yeah. Yep. I like that. I like the like attention to detail and that kind of stuff, because like they don't have to do that. That's something they literally could have just made the same art for all the versions. Yep. But the fact that they chose to do that, I think it says a lot. Ooh, here we have another unique. Oh, interesting.
Lady.
This is an interesting one.
Oh, yeah, cool. Read
it's
this
it's very simple. Very, very simple. It's just a 2-drop or 2/3. Its stats are quite bad, but well, I'll mention something about the zeros in a minute that I've also noticed. So she's 0/0/3, and if you play her from hand, you draw a card. And then she has the support ability. The next spell you play this turn loses fleeting. So the idea here is you play her, you draw a card, and then you can get rid of her to replay a spell essentially, right? Immediately, this doesn't strike me as like super crazy powerful, but I do kind of like the little. I do kind of like what she does. Yeah.
So, Kel, what do you make of these characters that have higher stat in like a single stat, and then they have zeros elsewhere?
So,
like, what's your read on that?
Well, there's Well, the first read is that I've noticed that there are some archetypes that care about having zeros in the stat line. I got some pretty strong uniques before that like cared about having zeros. They do crazy stuff if you have zeros. Like I think it's like 3 zeros is what they typically care about, at least the ones that I've seen. So like that being an archetype or like some sort of strategy, I find very interesting. It also is like just generally speaking, well, I mean it's unique, so I can't talk about like card design because it's procedurally generated. But obviously it's like quite useless in 2 of the biomes, but very strong. Well, not very strong, but okay. And in one of the other ones. Yeah, I see a card like this, and to me, I would evaluate it as a 2-drop that lets me draw a card, like essentially. Just because it's blank on 2 fronts. Sometimes it'll help you. Maybe it'll help you on turn 1 where you care about all of the things, or not exactly turn 1, but in your starting location, right? So I evaluate this card as it stands as a card that would be useful in the early game and like the first couple turns to help progress your expeditions early on, and potentially not great later. And I would probably just play it as a card draw plus the other effect, right? So like to me, this is a 2-drop that draws you a card and then also lets you play another spell a second time. And I do believe there is a spell that literally is just like a 1 or 2 drop that draws you a card.
Yeah, magical training.
Yeah, so like this is kind of what that reminds me of. You do have to use one of your unique slots for that though, which you only have 3. That seems pretty costly. that's the major cost here. So I wanted to just get kind of your thinking right now on where you're at with the zeros, because I think there's an analysis that people who especially people who come from like Magic the Gathering backgrounds, that takes place that is it's different in Altered than it is in those games, and that's when you look at a 0/0/3, you kind of look at it as being having low stats, right? I mean, like that seems like a really obvious thing to say,
So you look at something like that and you think, okay, what if this was in Magic? It would be like a 0/3 or, something that draws a card or whatever. And you would think about how useless that is on the board, and how it's just going to get, you block with it and then it dies and whatever. In Altered, there are, we as we play through the game, we're progressing through different biomes, and we're always going to have different combinations of different biomes that we're actually trying to seek. And every game plays the same, where there are three different cards that have all the different permutations of biomes. So there is one card in play at every game that has lone water on it, and then the other side is forest and mountain.
Right.
And this card is so funny as a 0/0/3. You mentioned early game. I agree. In early game, when you play this card turn 1, you are almost guaranteed, not almost guaranteed. I'd say the 3 is not almost guareed, but a 3, you have a decent shot of actually getting a progression on one side. But as it's a 0/0/3, your opponent is also going to get a progression on that side. They have put a 1/1/1 down, and they get to progress there too.
Right.
But that's not all bad, because you still got to draw a card and get a progression, and then you have this to play in a future turn in your reserve, or to sack to something that requires a cost like that or something, or to use its ability, which is nice. But then there's a turn later in the game, and you never know when it's going to be, and you're not even 100% sure if it's going to come up, when you will be going for lone water, and that's the only thing you actually care about for progression that turn, and it's possible your opponent is also going for lone water on that same turn. It's not 100%, but it's possible. And when that situation comes up, this is the same as a 2-cost 3/3, if you want to think about it in Magic terms, that draws a card, which starts to feel a lot better, because it's not giving up anything at that point. There's no stat reduction. It only cares about the 3, right?
I think the big things to look at when evaluating a card like that is cost of inclusion, and then opportunity cost as well, right?
Yeah.
And that's the big things where I look at a card and I try to evaluate when it's going to be useful. Not exactly like how useful it is, but like when it would be useful. And so, like, if this is a card using up one of your unique slots, that's just going to be like sitting in your hand until you wait for it to be good. I don't know if I want to put cards that function that way in my deck, right? I want my cards mostly to be good all the time. For the most part, there are some circumstances where you're searching for a combo or some other kind of thing, but that's how I think about stuff like this. So that's how basically I approach this, as not exactly a 0/3 for Magic. I approach this as like sometimes it does nothing, and then maybe on the one turn it'll do something.
Yeah. It's conditionally got stats. And that's, I mean, I think flexibility is what I'm looking at, which is really saying the same thing. It's the opportunity cost thing. It's not always going to be a body on the board that is super relevant. However, when it is relevant though, like 3 stats for 2 cost and drawing a card is actually quite valuable. And there are plenty of times throughout the game when you will be on water and other biomes, and the opponent might still get to progress, but you being able to put that 2 down, make sure you progress that turn, and then it replaces itself in hand is actually, I wouldn't underrate that, is what I'd say.
Oh yeah.
So I'd say this is a medium to maybe slightly above medium unique, and I think that's a little surprising. But the biggest cost of this is the unique slot. But if everyone's got different uniques, and if you don't have everything on Baku level, I think you wouldn't. I don't think you'd be mad about including that.
Yeah.
Maybe
I mean,
either.
like, in the ideal world, you'll be running like 3 Baku level uniques, right? But you don't know. Though, I mean, Altered has actually made it quite well. We'll see how it pans out, but on paper, it seems quite easy to be able to trade for the uniques that you want, because they're going to have like this digital marketplace where folks can trade the cards and all that kind of stuff. We'll see how that actually shakes out once it like fully rolls out. But I imagine, well, I'm definitely going to be dabbling in it myself. I'll probably toss up all my cards that I don't really care about or have any use for, and maybe we'll see what happens. I did literally, this is not a great comparison because a lot of people have negative emotions towards this, but this is what I did when the Diablo 3 auction house came out.
I knew you were going to say Diablo 3 somehow. Yep, 100%.
And I'm not going to lie, I made like $200 or $300 off the Diablo 3 auction house. So of real money in college. That money was like super useful in college. I got a, I'm not gonna get too much in the weeds on this, but I got a really high statted Storm Shield, and this is back when Torment difficulty was actually incredibly brutal. It was really hard, and Storm Shield was like one of the best defensive items in the game. I got a really good Storm Shield, and I sold it for $90 US. So yeah, I'm not like, you know, saying the praises of the auction house. I think it was kind of an insane thing to do, but at the same time, I still like, you know, I was like, you know what, let's see if I can make some money off of this thing. No reason not to, really, if you're playing the game already.
Yeah.
And so, not quite the same, but still having like some sort of like digital storefront is going to make it easy for people to trade, is kind of what I'm getting at. It was really easy for me to do that in Diablo 3. It'll be easy to do that in this game too, because hey, you open up a card, it's really cool. You need to use it, put it up on the auction house. And what makes it great and almost analogous to Diablo is that you don't have to mail the card when someone buys it. They just get the digital ownership and then they can print it themselves, which I think is really cool. Especially when selling international. Sell a lot of cards international, you know, that can be a little tricky sometimes. Foundry Engineer. Conjuring Seal. Yeah. I mean, in comparison, in terms of just card draw equity, here we have Conjuring Seal. This is a rare version, 3-drop. This is faction shifted to Ortis, but lets you draw 2 cards for 3, so it's kind of like your divination stat line. And then you can play it again for 5 to draw another 2 cards, which is actually not too bad. This one does not have fleeting. But here's the draw 1 card for 2 kind of effect, plus additional upside afterwards. Yeah. I do want to say, I haven't mentioned this yet. One thing that immediately sold me on Altered, and this is a small thing, but it's important for me just in terms of helping the game be fun. But Altered is a game where you draw 2 cards a turn, and just drawing 2 cards instead of 1 helps so much, especially in a game that uses a resource system like Altered, where you take cards from your hand, you put them face down. Similar to many games. I think the most common one people will know these days is probably like Lorcana or whatever, but it existed since the World of Warcraft TCG. Maybe even before that, I don't remember. But being able to draw 2 cards a turn, by the way, with that sort of mechanic, I think is really great, because it means that even with an empty hand, you could still play something and then play something, right? You can still progress your resource and then play something from hand, which I think is really good.
Yeah, we stand draw 2 games here.
Yep, I'm a big fan. Almost every single game that I play, you get to draw multiple cards a turn. I'm trying to think of one. I think Grand Archive is literally the only game that I play that has mechanically built-in draw 1 card. But they have like a lot of stuff that let you circumvent that. Like
the material deck is a 2nd card play per turn. It's almost the same thing.
It's
right.
It's very close. Yeah.
Like you just said, it's like it lets you play something and then play something. That's exactly what you do get to do in Grand Archive too.
Yeah. I would say it's very close. I think the big telling part about the material deck, hey, we got a Kesha finally. The material deck, it's telling that Grand Crusader's Ring is one of the best cards in it, and all it does is it lets you draw a card. So like being able to actually draw 2 is insanely powerful, and yeah, I like that this game lets you do that. No, it doesn't just let you do that; it's just built into the game. You draw 2 a turn. Other favorite games that let you do this: Wheatcross, you draw 2 cards a turn. Flesh and Blood, you drop to your hand size or your intellect, which is usually 4. So you basically draw 4 cards a turn. It's a little bit different in Flesh and Blood because you're facing off against someone who also has 4 cards, yada yada. But what else? Vanguard, you draw a lot of cards a turn because of the drive checks, which are essentially drawing multiple cards you draw for a turn. They also draw because of your drive checks. I guess Shadowverse is the only game that I play that really follows like the Magic kind of draw 1 per turn kind of deal. But even then, they don't have a resource system where you have to play cards from hand as a resource, so it's not quite the same, right? Every card is live in Shadowverse. So yeah. Anyway, small tangent about drawing cards. If I ever made a TCG, that's one of the first things. You would draw multiple cards a turn. It wouldn't be a one turn Marty, or one draw a turn Marty. Teamwork training. Achilles. I got a pretty sweet Achilles in my Kickstarter boxes too. He's just a big dude. He's got fives across the board, literally, and then he has tough 1, which means it costs 1 more to target him.
He's a tough guy.
Yeah, I think the Achilles that I got that's unique also like spits out dudes or something. He's pretty good. It's pretty good.
Yeah.
He might be like a little bit stat boosted too.
Tough is ward for people who are familiar with Magic again.
Yep.
And it works on everything you want it to work on. So your opponent's spells and abilities and everything. It's just anything costs 2 more. It can be very, very strong.
Yeah. See, high ward numbers in Magic are very, very, very annoying.
Yeah.
Big old Cone Man. Fortis Attorney. So I have a question. I haven't pulled one of them yet, but I guess I'll just ask you as I go. And I think I know the answer to this, but I just want to make sure there's not a weird ruling about it. So, cards that lose fleeting and that keep losing fleeting, can you just play them infinitely then? So I have a couple of uniques that are just like, when played from reserve, I lose fleeting. Does that mean they just go back into reserve?
Yes.
Okay, so you can kind of play them infinitely, more or less.
Yeah, did you really expect Sun Wukong to just die that easily?
Yeah, I was just like, he seems good. I got some other uniques. Ooh. So the rare Achilles seems pretty strong. He's got tough 2 and then boosted stats, 5, 6, 6.
Mm-hmm.
The other one that we had was a faction shifted one.
He's a great example of Bravos. He's just big and tough to get through. Annoying.
I keep my boost when I go to reserve. This is one of those interesting cards that has 0 stats, like base stats. So it would be really good in that kind of deck that cares about the 0 base stat line thing.
It's unfortunate though that the 0 stat line thing is pretty much hard colored into Lyra. So you're not going to see much of that in the Izmir factions, at least for now.
Gotcha.
But yeah, like cards like Sun Wukong, Hua Mulan, Athena, those are all cards that have ways of losing fleeting when you play them from reserve.
Yeah.
And if your opponent doesn't have sabotage or a thing that gives fleeting, or just a thing that straight discards a card or something, then yes, you may just keep playing them, and they're good.
Sweet. Oh, this one has alternate art as well. Magical Training. This is the one that just is a 1-drop that lets you draw a card, and then 3 from reserve to draw a card. But yeah, different art, I noticed.
And that whole cycle of there's a training in each faction, so there's 6 different training cards, and that entire cycle of training cards they have alternate art available from the adventure pass, as it's called, which is basically sort of like the participation OP program that everyone gets to engage in when they go to their LGS to play, and they just have their account set up, and when they sign up for a tournament, it logs it in their account and it applies the progress to their adventure pass. And you get to kind of choose which faction you are playing for. It doesn't actually affect what you play in your tournaments or whatever, but it affects which promos you're getting, which alternate art you unlock on your account. So
nice.
You'll be able to unlock that alternate art magical training if you play for Izmir, and then you can print magical trainings with that alternate art whenever you want. But you just get it unlocked digitally.
Nice. Oh yeah, here's another training, the meditation training. I really like the art in this one. It's really pretty.
Yeah. Yep.
I can't remember her name. She's one of the. We pulled one of her early. Reen
and Orchid. Yep.
Yeah, she. I think she is one of my favorite, just aesthetically speaking,
art.
heroes.
It's my favorite art in the game. Yep.
Oh, you have good taste. You have good taste because I don't know if she's my favorite, but just looking over, I'm I really, really like her. In fact, in the digital app, that's what I chose as my icon.
Me too.
Oh, really? Okay. Didn't know that actually.
Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I don't know. I like her. I don't know if Muna's up there. Once again, I need to play a lot more and see. But I think Muna is up there as a early contender. It seems pretty straightforward. You want to make stuff big, maybe anchor some big stuff. Kind of kind of strategy. I don't know. We'll see. I like to have multiple. I like to have a lot of different decks. If I'm really into a game, I typically build a lot of different decks and a lot of different archetypes, because I'm not the kind of person who just like I only play control or whatever. It's mostly like I like to play these sort of archetypes, and I like to swap between them. So I like to play some, aggro red deck win, some big stompy, some control. I like to play a lot of stuff. Sweetest Disciple.
Yeah,
Great.
I can't stop building decks for different factions.
Jellyfish.
Speaking of that meditation training, I had a deck that I played at our locals last week. It's an Argent and Spike Muna deck. They're a hero who allows you to discard a card from your reserve to make the next 3-drop or less you play come in anchored.
Okay, that
so
seems
it's gonna
good.
stay the whole time. Yeah. So I had a game where I kept the same 3-drop in from turn 1 until the end of the game. It just never left play.
That seems really good.
I just kept getting meditation trainings and other support abilities to keep it anchored, and it was awesome.
Yeah, something like this. Yeah, so there's a couple other interesting things I've noticed about this game. Once again, have not really played it all that much, but there are effects that I would... How do I put this? That I would evaluate to be very, very strong in other games that I don't know how strong they would be in Altered, just because of the fact that none of your permanents, well, your landmarks and stuff stick around, but for the most part, unless you're anchoring stuff, none of your permanents stay around for too many turns. So things that are like this, like Charge, which just says characters you control gain 1 boost, which basically just it means they get like a +1/+1/+1 counter, basically. And then in a game like, keep using Magic, but in a game like Magic, an effect like this is really good because your dudes stay around until your opponent kills them, or until you kill them yourself. Whereas in this game, your characters for the most part are going to stick around for like 1 turn and then go away, and then you can play them again. So I've noticed that I've tried to temper my evaluation on effects like this, especially ones that have high costs that are permanents themselves. So basically, I've gotten a couple of uniques that when you play them, and then they have an effect that are like, when you do this, do another thing. And I'm like, well, how many times are you actually going to do the other thing after you've paid 4 to play this dude, or whatever the effect is? And so some of them are like, this seems really good, and then I'm like, well, it seems really good, but then I'd probably need like 8 resources or something to make it like, work at all. So yeah, I don't know, just something that I've noticed while evaluating this game compared to some other games that are kind of out there.
You're 100% right, though. The temporal nature of units is something that's really tricky to get used to in your evaluation. Those like 8 mana size turns do come up where you can just go to town and you do the thing, and then your board's insane. But that's not, the early game use of it at all.
This card seems pretty sweet. This faction, well, she's faction shifted. I think she seems pretty sweet specifically for this faction. So she's a 4 cost. Her name is Aja.
Yep.
She's a 4/5/4, so the stats seem pretty good. And when you play from hand, each player puts the top card of their deck into their mana zone, exhausted as an orb. So like this is a way you can ramp in like Bravos, which is like from what I've seen, a fairly aggressive, style faction that also has the big dragon like Shenlong or whatever. I don't know how many ramp type cards they have, but I haven't seen much. So this kind of effect seems really good for that.
Yeah, Aja was my spoiler card, which is really fun and exciting. And so I made sure to take good advantage of that, and I built... so that's the Bravos one, the faction shift one. She's normally in Muna.
Yeah,
and,
that makes sense. Muna is where I would expect it to be.
Yeah, I have... So my other Muna deck right now is a pure ramp Muna deck that plays turn 3 Hydrocana, which is a gigantic dragon that is eternal, never leaves play, and gets 4 boost counters when you play him, and then every noon.
What?
Yep.
That seems good.
So I played a really, really fun game with that deck as well last week, where I got I had my turn 3. I couldn't play anything. I literally passed turn 3. Turn 3. I went pass. You go. And my opponent was like, okay. And they, obviously took both sides. They had a huge lead on me. They got to the point where they were 1 space away from winning, and then I completely stopped them cold, and then won all of my progressions and won the game, because it turns out when you have a 21-21-21 Hydrocana on one side and a 17-17-17 Hydrocana on the other,
Oh my god.
it's really hard to lose.
Are these just the rare versions, or do you have like special unique versions of them?
I'm running the rare version of the Hydrocana and Muna. The rare version of Hydrocana and Muna has Tough X, where X is the number of plants you control, and it's a plant itself, so it's automatically Tough 1. So then once you get the 2 Hydrocanas down, they're both Tough 2, and you just spend your actions playing more plants to make it harder and harder and harder for your opponent to interact with them at all.
I got, so 3 of the uniques that I pulled that really caught my attention were ones that have to do with plants. Some of them are just like, all your plants get a boost, or like, I get a boost whenever you play a plant, or whatever. Like, I got like 3 of them that were like, really stood out to me, that I was just like, well, this wants me to play a plant deck, right? It's like everything just is telling me to play plants.
Plant Kindred is good.
All right, so we did pull another unique, so this is going to be our 5th one. We only have 1 more pack, so this is likely our last one. This one is a Bravos Vanguard. Bad stats, high cost, so hopefully the effect is really good. So it's a 3 cost, 4 cost, 2/1/2. And it says, you may have target character other than me lose fleeting and gain a boost. And then also sabotage. And these are both, I think actually seems pretty good. This is,
the sabotage is when played from anywhere also?
Yeah, they're both when played from anywhere. So this seems pretty good, actually.
Actually, this is pretty fire. So
I can see why it now costs 3 and 4 and has low stats, because the effects are quite strong.
Bring back that Bravos Blade Dancer you were looking at earlier.
All right, let's see. Was it just a rare one?
I can't remember where. You might have a rare one there either way. Okay.
Well,
it's in Bravos also.
It's a faction shifted one, but yeah.
We can just look at it. It's in Bravos also. It's not going to be. It's going to get the point across here.
Yeah.
So this has an ability called Seasoned, which is it's largely a Bravos ability unless it's faction shifted a little bit, but it allows it to keep its boost when it goes to reserve. So yeah, you boost this thing up, and then if you have a unit that also will boost it and make it lose fleeting, then it's going to go to reserve again, and then it's going to keep those boosts, and then you play it again, and then you give it more boosts, and you get to keep kind of doing the thing, right? For as long as you can keep making it lose fleeting. Getting to do that and sabotage your opponent at the same time, though? Wow.
Yeah, so for those who don't know, sabotage means you basically have to pick one of their cards in the reserve, and it just gets, I don't know the nomenclature, discarded, destroyed. It gets sent to their discard pile.
Yep.
I think what makes that particular thing work very well with the Blade Dancer is the Blade Dancer only has a 1 cost from hand. So this card has a 3 cost from hand. So you can essentially just do this on your second turn, because you can go 3 and 4, right? And they don't have to be in the same lane either. You can do separate lanes. Yeah, that seems pretty good.
And then you have Basira and Kaizaimon, who's a hero that lets you put an extra boost on something that you boost that turn. So it gets pretty out of control pretty fast. That Bravos unique that you just got is competitive with the Baku in your box, in my opinion.
Yeah, it seems really, really good. This is one of the ones that, in my opinion, feels obviously very strong, because you get multiple effects anytime you play it, and the effects seem like very good. Yeah, just having something lose fleeting is almost the same as anchoring, right? It's like pretty close. Just makes it, stick around, but not quite the same. But still, it helps you keep the character in effect. In fact, actually, I would say that the losing fleeting is a little bit, it's interesting in that it'll help you replay on enter effects, right? Because it'll just go back to your reserve, and then you can replay them from reserve again. So it actually synergizes more with like replay effects. Yeah.
Now you are absolutely cooking, and I think that really just highlights too what before we end this video, what I really want to impress on people, and something that caused me to, I fell in love with Altered at this point a year and a half ago, almost. Well, not quite a year and a half ago, a little over a year ago, year and a couple months, when we had that early preview that we got to do at Gen Con that year.
The one that I was invited to, but I was not able to go to.
Yeah,
But
so sad.
But it has led to, like, literally, it led to this. And also this giant 20-pound box that they sent me that I'm going to be doing a video on as well. Because
Yes.
I was like, hey, I can't make it to Gen Con, but I would still like, I'm still interested in the game. And I would like to be, you know, in the loop. So if you ever have anything going on, you know, let me know. And so, you know, long story short, I did a spoiler for them, and I've kind of kept up with it a little bit. I did personally back the Kickstarter, but Dan is the other side of the story where he was actually able to go and experience it like firsthand. Anyway, sorry to cut you off. Go ahead.
No, that's, I mean, I think your story is also, you know, a really important piece of this too, because I think, Kel, you're seeing, and I hope the audience is seeing the many facets that are in this game. Like this game is so fascinating to me because it has a system, a gameplay system that at its core is just making numbers bigger and comparing them, to the point where I've had some people look at it for the first time and be like, isn't this just war? Like this, it's just like war, right? You just, whoever has the bigger number wins. But when you actually get, I always think that's a pretty reductive comparison, but when you actually get into the game, you see like all these different facets. We've talked about so many different things just in this video alone, from, you know, relevant stats at different parts of the game, different times, different sides of the board, tempo plays of when you play things, how to sandbag things, how to time things, and then strategies. We've talked about a ton of different strategies of like when you choose to lose turns to play landmarks or to ramp or to, you know, just like the game has these really, really deep decision trees that start from turn one, and it gets even deeper about like what cards you play out and when to play more cards that you need from your hand, even though it'll cause you to overcap on your reserve and you'll have to discard cards from reserve. You're actually losing card advantage to make those plays. So you have these like really interesting decisions, like, should I play this card from hand even though it's going to cost me half of a card by having to discard an extra card from reserve this turn because I'm not like perfectly keeping it at 2. And it's just, the game is just, it's just so good, Kel. It's so good.
Yeah, the war comparison I find very funny as someone who plays a lot of card games and has played a lot of card games, because you could literally make that argument about probably on like 90% of the TCGs that exist. Like, to some degree, you could be like, oh, Vanguard, it's just about whoever has the bigger number, right? Like,
right.
Or like almost any game to some degree. So like, I don't know.
I'm unfortunately, like, I actually just very recently did call a game a lot like War on a video when I was reviewing Ultraman from Gen Con. I only use the comparison very sparingly, and when I feel more of the mechanics are more appropriate to the mechanics of War. But in this case, it's like, I get why people say it, is what I'm saying. Like I get, you see that immediate comparison, you go, oh, you know, like, you're just looking at numbers and it was the bigger number. You don't have the combat, you don't have that kind of stuff, but it's crazy how in depth the turns and the decisions actually do end up getting. And I've just had so much fun exploring this, and I'm excited for more people to start to explore it too.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, and I've said it multiple times. I've said it in almost all of the videos that I've made so far about this game. But this is a game that I look at, and I immediately knew that it was going to be, I don't want to say something special. That's the first thing that came to my head, because maybe that has too much sense of grandiose. But this is a game that I think that if anyone watching this cares about the TCG industry as a whole, whether or not you are interested in Altered, whether or not you plan on playing it, I think you should be paying attention to this game, because it is doing so many unique and different things that I think it's just warranted that people need to be paying attention, and they need to see what Altered is doing and what happens with this game. Whether it's a huge success, whether, you know, anything else happens, like, I think it's very, very fascinating. So like, anyone who cares about card games and the TCG industry, I think, yeah, if you're not paying attention to, you definitely should. Even if you're like, if you're like one of the dozen comments that I get in the last few videos that are complaining about the QR code, like, you should still be paying attention to it. Which is funny, by the way, if you don't like the QR code, something that I noticed, let me grab just like a small little bit of cards. When you're holding the cards, you can't even see the QR code. I'm just saying.
Mhm.
Like this is my hand of cards. You can't even see it's like right here. And even then you can hardly see it. I understand where they come from because they just look at it, a single card,
Yep.
and they just laser focus into this. And then this little thing looks like it's like that big. And they're
Yep.
like, oh, I can't see anything else other than that. But I will say from opening, this is my 5th box of this game. And then the starter decks and all that kind of stuff. I barely even like pay attention to it or recognize it at all. Especially when you're holding multiple cards like this. Like it's not really something that you see all that much. So I don't know.
I've tried to tell that to everybody. I stopped noticing the QR code about 2 or 3 turns into my first game of Altered. If you've never played it and you're just looking at the cards, if you play one game, I think it'll enter stealth mode and it will not even register for you anymore. And I tell that to everybody, like, just try playing, because if that's literally the thing that's stopping you from getting into it, if you try playing the game and then you still are bothered by the QR code, just send me a message. I would love to hear. You'd be the first person I've ever talked to where that was the case. And I would love to hear it. It would be impressive.
It's probably going to be the most common comment on this video. It has been on my last 2 videos, where it's just there's always just someone's like, I can't get past the QR code. I'll never play this game because of the QR code. And I'm just like, honestly, like I noticed the QR code at first. I'm not quite that, to that degree, but I was like, okay, yeah, the QR code, it does kind of like, especially if we're on darker cards, it does kind of like stick out a little bit. But honestly, after opening my first box, I kind of stopped paying attention to it. And I will say, I have heard some people say like, oh, maybe I should put it on the back of the card. I don't think that's a good idea, because just of how the way card games work, you should not have identifying features on backs of cards. But the other thing is, like, they're like, oh, maybe they should just do a full card thing, like Light Seekers and Warhammer Age of Sigmar Champions. And I will say, as someone who was one of the only content creators for Age of Sigmar Champions, who has opened up many, many boxes, those cards are much harder to scan than these cards, because the QR code is just really, really easy to pick up, and it scans very, very quickly if you just kind of like put your camera like right over where the QR code is. And you can even do it with like one hand, just holding it like this, and I just kind of go like this, like that, and it just works.
It's so fast.
I've only run into, I will say this is the one like actual maybe negative I have, and in the 5 boxes that I've opened, I haven't scanned these ones in yet, but in the 5 boxes that I've opened, I have run into, I think, 5 cards that had super jacked up QR codes that will not scan.
I've heard about that, yeah.
And like, they're like jacked up to the point where it's impossible to get them to scan, not because of like blurriness or fidelity, it's because it literally did not print like the bottom little bit of it. So you know how like there's these 3 squares in the QR code? The bottom square is not a complete square, right? It's just like the whole thing is just white. It doesn't exist. So it's like literally impossible to scan. And
I've heard that the people who have had that, they can just contact Equinox and show the pictures of the cards, and Equinox will credit your account with them. Yeah. So
I imagine something like that would happen. But for me, it was only like 5 cards. 3 of them were commons, and 2 of them were just like regular rares. They weren't uniques or anything. So it's just like, I'm not gonna. It's not worth my time, to be honest, to do that.
Right.
When I'm opening 5 boxes, and I'm probably gonna have play sets of all the stuff. If it turns out that I really need one of those rares or something, maybe I'll do that. But I imagine it'll be totally fine. So for the most part, it's been very, very quick, and the QR code thing has been very, very fast. So yeah.
So Kel, to kind of get this towards our little conclusion here.
Yes.
Your box. How do you feel? You got your uniques here. How did you feel your box went? So
I'm just gonna give my overall take on the opening experience of this, and then also versus the Kickstarter edition. I've opened up a lot of card games in my life, and some card games I open up and I'm just like, this is not fun, or like this is just feels kind of miserable. I'm not going to name any card names or card games, but there have been some in recent memory where I've just opened it up and I'm like, this just does not feel good or fun. I think this game is really, really fun to open. most of it boils down to the uniques. I will say, uniques are super super fun, and they give you this kind of chase that no other card game has, except for maybe Keyforge, like I mentioned, where you have like this cool unique thing that you always have to read, right? So even when you're playing another card game and you open up a chase card, I can say any card game. If you're playing Flesh and Blood and you open up a Tunic, if you're playing Magic the Gathering, you open up your Liliana of the Veil. That's a boomer take, but still, it is, yeah. And you're like, cool, I got my Liliana. I don't need to read it because I got it. But this one you have to read all of your uniques because they're unique, and you have to see if they're good. And I really like that. I really like that. It, like, you stop and you're like, oh, what's this card? I need to read it. And it gives you the feeling of opening something blind, even if you know every card in the set. And I think that's just very special. So from that standpoint, I really, really enjoy it. And yeah, I mean, personally, I don't know every card in the set anyway, but still, like, being able to have that kind of thing is just super, super cool. There's the foiler stuff. I'm sure I'll be more excited about opening the foilers as this becomes a thing, and I'm able to actually print these out and foil them. I don't know if I mentioned this in a video, but I mentioned this somewhere, that I have a feeling that at some point the unique foilers I won't need anymore. I'll just have so many freaking unique foilers because you can only have 3 in a deck, and I'll probably figure out what uniques I like and what are good. I'll just have a ton of these. I'll probably need more commons than anything because most of your deck has to be commons, and so if I want to foil out a deck, I'm gonna need a crap load of common foilers. And I actually think that's kind of an interesting thing where it kind of turns it on its head, where you actually want the common foilers more than these other ones, because maybe the rare ones you need 15 of them, but
no, you need a third of that usually.
Yeah,
because you only need to foil the card once in your collection, then you can print 3 foil copies of it.
Really? I thought you needed to do. I wasn't sure about this. So you only need 1 copy of the card and you can print it 3 times, or do you need 3 separate copies of the card?
No, you can print it 1,000 times if you own 1 copy of the card. You can only register it in a deck 3 times if you own 3 copies of the card.
Okay.
But
That's
when you register for a tournament, you're not registering the card quality, card condition. It doesn't care if it's foil or non-foil.
I see. Okay, interesting. I get what you're saying. So what basically you're saying is that when you register your deck, you have to have the unique separate cards, right? So you need, like, say I'm playing 3 of these Bravos Blade Dancer faction shifted cards. I need 3 separate copies of these scanned in to play competitively. But if I wanted my deck to have 3 foil versions just to play with at that event, you would only need 1 of them to be foil, and then have...
It's a toggle on the card in your account. If you unique foiler, if you'd go to the page of Bravos Blade Dancer on your account, it would tell you how many Bravos Blade Dancers you own, and it would tell you whether or not you have foiled the card. And when you there's a button there to apply foiler to the card. You apply the foiler, and then it goes, cool. Now you can print foil versions. It has been unlocked.
All right, that's sweet. So you don't have to. Basically, what I'm saying is you don't have to apply the foiling to a unique card, like, not a unique. I shouldn't use the word unique. An individual card.
Yeah.
It just applies it to all versions of that card on your account, essentially.
This is the cheapest game to play blinged out full foil decks in.
Yeah, that's pretty wild. I just assumed that you had to apply the foil to each specific version. So, like, this rare goes to this one, and then if I had another one, I would have to use another rare. But don't.
That wouldn't be fun.
I mean, it feels so. It feels very. That feels very TCG to me. And I like how you said that doesn't feel very fun. This is another thing that I mentioned about this game. I think this game, just in general, the way it's designed, is very, very consumer friendly, which I actually very much like, and it's something that's become more important to me in card gaming and in hobbies as I get older. Which is kind of funny because as I get older, I tend to have a little bit more money than I did when I was younger, and just being more affordable to more people is a huge bonus to me because it helps more people play these games that I really, really love. And I've played a lot of games that are very cost prohibitive to a lot of people. And, when you take a step back and you realize the cost of these things and you put it into comparison to what other things in life costs, you can get to you realize things, right? When you realize your deck is $800 and you're like, yeah, whatever, it's my deck. And then you realize the cost of like what $800 can get you in real life, and other things.
A washer and a dryer or something.
Yeah, like
right?
actual important needed things.
A new fridge.
Yeah.
Those are, I only reference those because those are real world costs that I have needed to think about in the last year or two, unfortunately.
Yeah, like an air conditioner or something, which is something that's been much more needed for me personally, as it's been very, very hot in Oregon recently, and we just don't have central AC. It was just a thing for a very long time. We're just like, yeah, Oregon's cold and rainy. We don't need AC. Turns out, yeah, it's very hot now. We have like 100+ degrees days, and it's brutal with no AC.
That's rough.
So now I have have to buy extra ACs, and we don't own our house, so we're not gonna, we can't just have someone install central air. So we have to, kind of, live with what we got. But anyway, my point is that this game is very consumer friendly, and what I like about it is that you can literally print out a deck for your friend. I don't know what the costs are going to be yet, and I don't think they've gone over exactly what the costs are, but the ability to just be like, hey, friend or loved one or whoever person that I want to play card games with, I want you to play this card game with me. Here's a deck. Here's a complete competitive deck. Here you go. You can't play it in any tournaments, but you can play it with me, and you can play it casually at the kitchen table or whatever. I think that's just brilliant. Like, it's the easy. It literally is the easiest way to get someone to play a game. So, and you can just be like, yeah, you keep it.
And it's so cool too, because there's the additional step is still there where they can play that deck and go, oh wow, this deck was really fun. I think I want to play this game competitively. I want to use this deck competitively. And they don't have to then be like, will you sell me the rights or whatever? They can just go on the app and then just buy every card in the deck digitally that they want. And instantly they don't have to wait for shipping. They're like none of that. They just go, okay, now I own the deck. The only thing they can't do if there's any uniques in the deck, they would have to either find similar uniques, or they'd have to haggle with you to try and get the digital rights for the unique or something. Yeah. Or just take them out and put rare or put some more commons in or something instead. So
or they can buy some packs and use whatever uniques they pull. Like they can do whatever they want. Like
it's so cool.
It's once again another one of the reasons why I think people should be paying attention to this game. It's really, really doing a lot of unique stuff, and yeah, I think this is a game that, regardless of what happens, people will be talking about it for ever. I guess people are still talking about like Hyborian Gates. If you're a weirdo like me and no card games, so like the fact that I remember Hyborian Gates, this is a game that people will remember for a very long time. So, yeah, that's a little spiel on Altered. The box opening experience is really good. I really enjoy this. Versus the Kickstarter edition, I still got five uniques here. And in my Kickstarter boxes, I felt like I got about almost 6 every time. I think it was pretty consistently like almost 6, and then maybe I'd get like a foil one or something. I got a lot more unique foilers in my Kickstarter boxes, but that might just be variance. I typically got like 3 to 5 in my Kickstarter box. I got a lot in my Kickstarter.
That's a bit high. It's the average is I think about 2.
I think
2.5.
I think I opened almost 3 or more in all of them. Maybe I just got really lucky. I think my boxes were really good. But I have a ton of unique foilers now, like as mentioned. I also got the gold pack that had an additional 4. Yeah. But yeah, I think this game's really fun. I don't know. I guess this is the last thing I'll ask you, Dan. And this is just because I haven't actually tried to build any decks yet. I've only really, interfaced with like starter decks. I don't know if you have done this at all yet. How easy is it to build a deck from like a booster box or 2 booster boxes or something like that? Do you know what like typical pull rates in terms of play sets and stuff are? Like, how many boxes would you need to get a play set of the commons, for example, or the rares?
Yeah, so I don't, unfortunately, I can't give you like exactly this is how many boxes to get a play set of commons, rares, etc. I can tell you from my experience, to be able to get to rares and having a set of all rares, it did take me, I think Jordan and I in our podcast, we did calculate this way early on, and it ended up landing about exactly right. It did take me just up to about 9 boxes to get. I have pretty much a play set of every rare, and I think it's one of those things where I have a couple that I have like 2 copies of, and I have a few that I have 4 or 5 copies of, and it's you know just have to do little swappies at some point, and then I'm good. Rares, of course, there's 2 rares for every common in the set, right? So there's like a lot of rares, so it's kind of expected that it's going to take a little bit to get that. Commons, I'm not sure. I've never had problems finding commons. Not even digging into my entire stack of commons. So I imagine you're getting a full set of commons within a couple of boxes at most. Or at least you should be pretty darn close. I'd say if you had 3 boxes, you're golden. You gotta be good at that point. I'm pretty sure. I would imagine 2 is probably covering it though.
Yeah. I mean, I can look at my app because as of now, at the time of this recording, I've opened up 4 boxes, but I've only scanned in the 2 that I've shown in a video. This one will be scanned up by the time this goes live, but I can actually kind of see and look.
Those are Kickstarter boxes, though, too. If you're buying retail, it might take a few more boxes to get rares, now that I think about it. Yeah,
for the rares, you get more in the Kickstarter, like you mentioned at the start. So this is all we're looking at commons here. So let me put this down. So for commons, like the Me Elemental, the Kellen Elemental, I have 3. Foundry Mechanic, I have 2. So it looks like Axiom Salvager 2. Assembly Overseer 2. So it looks like between 2 and 3 with 2 boxes scanned. Kickstarter boxes. Okay.
Yeah, that sounds about right then.
So like it feels like you're likely going to be opening 2 to 3 boxes if you just want all the commons. Maybe even less for this version, the retail version, because you're getting more commons, right?
Yeah.
Because you're getting more rares in the other version. But
so
yeah.
To answer your question a little more, because I've been asked this a number of times, like a lot of players ask, like, what should I do? Like, how should I approach getting into this game? What makes the most financial sense to do? And I think the big thing that plays into all of this too is that this is a faction-based game. You are you're not building. When I got into Star Wars Unlimited, I'm like, I need all 4 colors because I might build a red-blue deck one day and a blue-green deck the next day and a yellow-red deck the next, right? In this, I might build different factions because I like playing the game a lot and I like playing different factions, but I can never put my Muna cards into my Bravos deck. It's just, it doesn't work. And I think, and you know, Kel, you've been getting into things like Shadowverse, Cardfight, Vanguard is a game that those have faction-based restrictions to a degree as well. It's a little more open from what I understand, with a few different types of cards.
It's pretty close to this. Not quite the same. This is a little bit more restrictive in that regard. So like, for example, in Shadowverse, you can't mix the crafts together, but there do exist like some neutral cards. Not a lot, in fact. There's only a couple neutral cards that come out each set. So for the most part, it's very... I don't want to go on a tangent on Shadowverse. I think Shadowverse is literally one of the most cost-effective games to play on the market right now. I think it's like one of the cheapest next to like Pokemon. And it's just a really, really like low cost, low barrier of entry game to play competitively. But other than that, it's very like easy to not build decks, but easy to get what you want for like, so for example, you can use this as an example too. They'll say like, you know, I like Ysmir and I only want to play Ysmir. You just get the Ysmir cards, just get all the Ysmir cards and then you're like good to go. And the same thing's true for Shadowverse, right? You're like, I like Dragoncraft. You just buy the Dragoncraft cards every set, and then you're good to go. And it's usually not that bad. Like it's like $150 or something to get literally a playset of every Dragoncraft card every set. And so every time a new set drops, you drop like $100 or something. You can literally build every single Dragoncraft deck that exists in the entire game. And I feel like this is similar-ish to that.
Yeah, exactly. And that's so my recommendation to people has been this. If you are on a budget and you want to get into Altered, but you still want like, look, always the cheapest thing to do is just buy singles, right? Just like wait a little bit for the marketplace to release, go buy the digital singles because people will flood them on there. and then print out your deck, and then you're good to go. That is 100% the most budget way to play the game. But if you're looking for that in between, you're like, I don't want to spend too much money, but I do want to open some packs, and I do want to build a deck that is at least somewhat competent. And I think that's probably the bell curve of people who play TCGs in general, right? It's like they want to open a little bit and they don't want to be left behind.
Yeah.
And for those people, what I recommend is buy a starter deck. These starter decks are going to, the reason the starter decks are great is because of the faction splitting, the fact that you open this box and you're getting a couple of each common for a bunch of different factions and you can only play one faction at a time. That starter deck is going to give you that baseline of cards for your faction. So you can immediately go like, yep, I've got play sets of a bunch of good cards. I have a bunch of rares. There are a pile of rares in each starter deck as well that are going to get you started on the like sets of rares that you actually want to get.
You get 8 in every starter. So you basically get
eight rares in a starter is like, yeah.
It's pretty good. You get 8 out of your 15. So when you consider that, when you think about it in that regards, you get more than half of the starters the rares that you need to cap out your rares in your deck, which I think is
exactly. Cool. And I would say if you really like the character in that deck, because those decks are built around one of the 3 characters in each faction. So you really like Akesha and Izmir, for example, just because we've talked about Izmir a bunch.
Yep.
Buying 2 of that starter is not a bad idea at all, because you're gonna get the extra copies of the rares then to be able to kind of fill out that set, and that'll cost you a good chunk less than trying to fish them out of packs.
Yep.
But I think the really nice kind of bang for buck start is like a booster box, because then you're going to get your uniques. You can use those uniques to kind of direct you to kind of what you want to build. Even like opening the box first and then choosing a faction based on the uniques you get is not a terrible strategy at all. Then you go head back to the shop and go like, okay, I got some good Ortis uniques. I'll buy the Ortis starter and I'll play that if you don't have a strong feeling towards which faction you want to play already.
Yeah, I mean, like, this is also one of the games where I think it's like, I mentioned that I found it really, really fun to open up boxes, both the Kickstarter version and this version. But I think it's also one of the games where you do get some like sweet, I don't want to say value, but the fact that you have uniques, right? And the fact that like the nature of the uniques makes opening a box, like, I don't want to say worth it, but like a very fun experience that, like Dan said, can direct you one way or another. And I think it makes opening boxes, I don't want to say more viable. It just feels better. I just want to put it that way. It feels better to open a box for this than to open a box for something like Flesh and Blood, where you open it up, you don't get your legendary that you want, and then all the cards are just like, okay, whatever. Like, it feels different being like, okay, I get this unique, and now I can maybe build around this unique or whatever. And, you know, the fact that you end up with like a little pile of them, right? I got 5 here, means that you can kind of like pick and choose and go from there. I think it kind of like, I don't know how to put it. Once again, it just feels like Keyforge, right? Opening the sealed product just feels more fun, and it feels more rewarding, I think.
Yeah, and I did enjoy playing Keyforge when it came out, and I enjoy opening those. But what I like more about this is that I don't have a bunch of decks that are just,
well, yeah,
I'm never going to use them. They're just a bunch of dead decks.
Keyforge had its own issues. I really liked Keyforge. I still have some sealed Keyforge booster boxes, like in my background. But Keyforge also had the problem of, like, at least in the early sets, you really wanted that Horseman deck, and a lot of people were just like, it's not Horseman, you throw it away or whatever. The best Keyforge, by the way, in my opinion, the most fun that I had was blind deck Keyforge, where you would just open up a deck and play it blind. That was my most fun playing Keyforge. Or when you could do like each player opens up like 3 decks and you pick which one do you want to play from the 3 decks. That's the most fun I had in Keyforge. But still, like, kind of what you're getting at, similar to Keyforge, is that like there isn't really an expected EV in the box. I mean, like, there kind of is, because we're seeing the market a little bit. We're seeing, you know, if you just want to buy purely singles and you don't care what your uniques do, you just want some uniques, you can get some low end uniques for somewhere between $5 to $15 a unique, and they'll be like kind of as good as rares, and they'll kind of like cover, you know, they'll at least give you 18 rares in your deck instead of 15 if you want to think about it that way. Yeah.
But when you open up a box, they could be anywhere from those uniques to, I think, Kel, honestly, your box is pretty good. You had two, what I think are very good uniques. You had one unique that I think is the Lyra one, I think is kind of niche, but like quite good in its niche.
He's
The,
yeah, he's interesting.
he's curious. I think he's quite good in his unique. I think your Jeanne d'Arc is one of the more interesting genres I've seen, just in the fact that it doesn't really do Jeanne d'Arc things. It kind of does in between Jeanne d'Arc things, and just it's a stat stick kind of card.
Yeah.
Where I think it's a very playable unique, but I call it just a mid unique. It's like it's a reasonable unique to play, but it doesn't like really push the strategy that the card is meant for, that je ne sais quoi of Jeanne d'Arc.
Right.
And you have your last one is the Lady, which is, again, I think a medium to medium plus unique, not an exciting unique, but one that fills the role. Like it does things. They're not explosive things, but it makes some value and it pushes your board. And I'd say overall, that's this is probably like I'd give this box an A, honestly, like not an A plus, right? Because you could have had like 3 or 4 insane uniques in here, right? But you got 2 hot uniques that I think are real good. And then the others, none of them were bad. They were niche to solid.
Yeah, the way I see it, just looking at these and what I have in my collection right now, these 2 are like, I don't know if I'll end up playing these cards. Maybe. These are like maybes. I'll likely, at least in my first couple builds, based on what the other stuff that I have, this Jeanne d'Arc seems pretty easily slotted into almost any Ortis deck I want to build, right?
Yeah, just throw it in. It just works.
Yeah, like just judging it by just pure stat lines, she is a 4 cost 4/3/3 plus the additional 1, so she's basically a 4 cost 5/4/4 across the couple turns, and then she could come out again and have even like a better stat line because it's 3 costs when played from reserve. So, and then she also has her other ability as well. So she seems just like solid, and then these 2 seem like very, very good. These 2 are ones that I'm like, yeah, this is a very, very high chance that these get into whatever, Bravos and Izmir deck that I build. Just how strong they are, especially the Vanguard. I feel like this one I can literally put in any Bravos deck and she's going to be very strong. So, whereas this one is a little bit more of a build around kind of thing, right? You do have to be doing the spell deck, which I assume is most Izmir decks, but you do have to be doing like the spells kind of thing. But yeah, my experience is only opening up 5 boxes, and I felt like every experience was great. I had fun doing it. I always wanted to open up more packs, and like that's the best thing I can say, I guess, is just like I want to keep opening more packs and see what like cool uniques I get. And that's not even like going over all of the other like rares and all that kind of stuff. I'll have a big sorting day where I sort through all my rares. Luckily, the app helps a lot if you scan them in, so you can see how many you have and don't have to. If you're like me and just have these piles, you don't have to dig through them too much. So anyway, yeah,
good box though. I think overall, good box, and I totally feel that the urge to open more. In fact, I'm looking at my box right now.
Yes,
and I'm really anticipating opening this one a lot longer than we expected.
Yes, that did. This is not an unboxing video. This is a discussion of Altered video, and I will likely call this video as such. I think it's a discussion of Altered with a veneer of box opening. That's actually not a bad name for a video. I don't know how clickable that is though. So with that said, we're going to actually open up another box. In fact, Dan's box, and we're going to open it up over on Dan's channel main deck. So I will have introduced him in the beginning of this video, but you should go check out his channel right now, like literally right now. It's going to be probably it'll definitely be in the description. We'll see if it's in the title as well. You can click it and it'll take you over to main deck. You should go check it out. You should also subscribe to Dan, because he talks about a lot of card games like I do. There is some overlap, but some differences as well, which I think is very cool. Like Dan mentioned Star Wars Unlimited, which is not a game that I've covered yet. And if you're into that kind of stuff, go check it out. But we do have some crossover. Like there's the obvious one right here, though Dan is much, much more into this than I am at this point. But we also do Grand Archive. Did literally casted Worlds with Dan for Grand Archive. So yeah, go check it out. It was very fun. I'm looking forward to doing it again for sure.
We're gonna try. I think we're gonna try to make a video on my channel a little bit faster. So I hope to see you guys there. Hope we didn't lose you already.
This will be another big deep dive. Hey yo, before we end, if anyone is watching this far, I want to have him say something, because I always like to comment like no one's even watching this far, and then I'll get like 1 or 2 people who are like I was, and I'm like all right, well now I know you sat through like the 2 hours or whatever it is of this discussion. So if you are sitting this far, just let us know what your favorite faction of this game that you've seen so far, or just your general impressions of this. I'd like to know, because honestly speaking, before we end, I've made, at this point, not including this video, 3 videos about Altered, and all of them, numbers-wise, have done very good for me. But numbers aren't everything for me, so I do want to know what the community thinks, and I do want to know other people's opinions of the game. And yeah, so let me know. A good combination for me to continue making videos about a game is that I enjoy it, and it does well, and the community enjoys it. That's the winning combination. So please let me know what you think of it down below. And while you're down there, go check out Main Deck. We'll see the other half of this video. Go do it. Okay. All right, bye.
Bye, everyone.
All right, cool. I was gonna try to do like a Ferris Bueller's Day Off kind of ending. He's like, still here? Go home.
Yeah.